All right, so Kamala Harris met with Netanyahu. He's in Washington, D.C. Of course, he gave his joint session of Congress yesterday, and he met with, and he's got plans to, then after the joint session, he had planned to meet with Kamala Harris, also with Joe Biden, and then he's going to fly down to Mar-a-Lago and meet with Donald Trump. Kamala is, yes, she is the VP, so there is reason, I suppose, for her to be meeting with Netanyahu, but she is still, at this point, the presumptive Democratic nominee. And remember how the last time that went, when there was a presumptive nominee, and they insisted, no, this is the guy, this is the guy. It's presumptive, not set in stone. Well, it wasn't set in stone. So it's not set in stone, but nonetheless, they're really playing up the optics with Kamala Harris. You know, they're trying to make her look very presidential. They're putting her out in front of the crowd more. They're trying to really get people to say, okay, I'll buy into this. She's the candidate, even though she's been completely anointed into this. Nobody voted for her. Not a single person has ever cast a vote for Kamala Harris for president of the United States. It's never happened. She didn't make it to the primary at all in 2020. She was selected by the Biden team to be the vice president. She's a Hillary Clinton they gave her, she's just the successor to Hillary Clinton. She has the entire Clinton apparatus behind her. The Bidens don't seem to like Kamala. It seems like the Obamas and the Clintons are at odds with one another, the power play in the Democratic forces behind the scenes. And it seems like it's Clintons versus Obamas, and the Clintons, they're at odds, but Kamala is a Clinton pick, and Obama maybe has his own plans. And we're going to get to that. We'll see how that kind of plays out. We'll talk about it over the next week or so, or I'm sure until up until she's the actual nominee. But let's listen to her presidential address that she gave after her meeting with Netanyahu. Let's hear her out. What is her vision for Israel? Watch this.
So I just had a frank and constructive meeting with Prime Minister Netanyahu. I told him that I will always ensure that Israel is able to defend itself, including from Iran and Iran-backed militias such as Hamas and Hezbollah. From when I was a young girl collecting funds to plant trees for Israel, to my time in the United States Senate and now at the White House, I have had an unwavering commitment to the existence of the State of Israel, to its security, and to the people of Israel. I've said it many times, but it bears repeating. Israel has a right to defend itself, and how it does so matters. Hamas is a brutal terrorist organization. On October 7, Hamas triggered this war when it massacred 1,200 innocent people, including 44 Americans. Hamas has committed horrific acts of sexual violence and took 250 hostages. There are American citizens who remain captive in Gaza. Sagi Deko Hen, Hirsch Goldberg, Poland, Idan Alexander, Keith Siegel, Omer Nutra, and the remains of American citizens Judy Weinstein, Gad Haggai, and Itai Hen are still being held in Gaza. I have met with the families of these American hostages multiple times now, and I've told them each time they are not alone, and I stand with them. And President Biden and I are working every day to bring them home. I also expressed with the Prime Minister my serious concern about the scale of human suffering in Gaza, including the death of far too many innocent civilians. And I made clear my serious concern about the dire humanitarian situation there, with over 2 million people facing high levels of food insecurity, and 500,000 people facing catastrophic levels of acute food insecurity. What has happened in Gaza over the past 9 months is devastating. The images of dead children and desperate, hungry people fleeing for safety, sometimes displaced for the second, third, or fourth time. We cannot look away in the face of these tragedies. We cannot allow ourselves to become numb to the suffering, and I will not be silent. Thanks to the leadership of our President, Joe Biden, there is a deal on the table for a ceasefire and a hostage deal. and it is important that we recall what the deal involves. The first phase of the deal would bring about a full ceasefire, including a withdrawal of the Israeli military from population centers in Gaza. In the second phase, the Israeli military would withdraw from Gaza entirely, and it would lead to a permanent end to the hostilities. It is time for this war to end, and end in a way where Israel is secure, all the hostages are released, the suffering of Palestinians in Gaza ends, and the Palestinian people can exercise their right to freedom, dignity, and self-determination. There has been hopeful movement in the talks to secure an agreement on this deal. And as I just told Prime Minister Netanyahu, it is time to get this deal done. So to everyone who has been calling for a ceasefire, and to everyone who yearns for peace, I see you and I hear you. Let's get the deal done so we can get a ceasefire to end the war. Let's bring the hostages home, and let's provide much-needed relief to the Palestinian people. And ultimately, I remain committed to a path forward that can lead to a two-state solution. And I know right now it is hard to conceive of that prospect, but a two-state solution is the only path that ensures Israel remains a secure Jewish and democratic state, and one that ensures Palestinians can finally realize the freedom, security, and prosperity that they rightly deserve. And I will close with this then. It is important for the American people to remember the war in Gaza is not a binary issue. However, too often the conversation is binary, when the reality is anything but. So I ask my fellow Americans to help encourage efforts to acknowledge the complexity, the nuance, and the history of the region. Let us all condemn terrorism and violence. Let us all do what we can to prevent the suffering of innocent civilians, and let us condemn anti-Semitism, Islamophobia, and hate of any kind. And let us work to unite our country. I thank you.
Okay. Not bad. Not bad. Certainly better than this is going to be a tough election, guys. If you're a one-issue voter and this is your one issue, and you're on if you're on the Israel side, I think it's pretty clear. Well, Trump's done some kind of interesting things too. We should have thought about adding this so that I could show you guys, but I'll just explain it. What Trump did, was it yesterday or even the day before, is he actually he published a picture on his Truth Social. You know, he doesn't use Twitter, but on Truth Social, he put a picture of a letter that he received from Abbas, the president of the PLO, the Palestinian PLO. And Abbas wrote him and said that he was alarmed by the assassination attempt and that he sends his best wishes and his condolences and whatnot. There is actually previous, and maybe we'll kind of get to this. Tomorrow, we've got a big guest that we're talking to about the election, 2020 election. So we don't have time to do it tomorrow, but maybe next week we'll kind of dive a little bit deeper into that, into Trump's relationship with Abbas, because it's quite interesting. He says that when he met with Abbas, he was like a father type figure. And I believe that there is some statements that Trump has made out there of saying that it was Netanyahu who was actually really blocking peace more than even the Palestinians were, despite what he had previously always believed. So what's interesting is that, you know, on the day before Netanyahu, or the day of that Netanyahu's to speak at the joint session of Congress, Trump publishes this picture of this letter he received from Abbas, which he received a few days earlier. And he says that he is going to be bringing peace to the Middle East. Trump says, he could bring peace to the Middle East. And he hand wrote on this letter to Abbas, all will be good. Thank you. All will be good. And it was kind of the timing to publish this image of a letter that you received from Abbas on the day that Netanyahu is speaking to Congress. that Trump doesn't do things without having thought them through. He's very good at optics. That's one thing he is brilliant at, is he knows how to work a crowd. He knows how to, he knows. So for him to publish that, that was really saying, it was almost like a giant FU in a way to Netanyahu in some ways. So curious, would Trump bring, even though he talks a tough talk, which he does that, and we know he does that. He says, "Oh no, somebody's gonna pay. It's gonna be bad," and he kind of rally again. He knows PR. He's really good with audiences, so he rallies up the crowd and he says those types of things. But when push comes to shove, would he? I mean, the Abraham Accords fell apart, so I don't think he would go and try to push those in particular again. I think that they would maybe go to a second round on that and maybe come to a different outcome. I think he tried it the Kushner way and the Netanyahu way, and it didn't work out. So I think he maybe would go a different route. But, or he could not, or he could, he was the one who moved the embassy from Tel Aviv to Jerusalem. He also basically allowed for illegal settlements and the aggressive building of illegal settlements in the West Bank. I mean, that was all done under Trump. He let them annex the Golan Heights from Syria. I mean, that was all done under Trump. So it's possible that he actually aggravates the situation more. We've seen what he does, and it is aggravating to the Palestinians and to the cause and to the right for them to have self-determination. We've seen what Biden and Harris, this administration, has done. They whine, they complain, but they ultimately still send all the bombs. They send all the weapons. So would Harris be any different than Biden? Possibly, right? She's her own person. Biden has a long, long history of being extremely pro-Israel. When he was a senator, he was very pro. He has a long history. So he might be, so it's possible that Harris would be more aggressive on Israel than Joe Biden. And maybe Harris would feel a little bit more emboldened to be aggressive against Israel than Joe Biden. Joe Biden didn't want to be called an anti-Semite. He's like, I love Israel. Well, Harris is married to a Jew. So maybe she would have like some sort of hey, and there's chatter that she might actually name Shapiro as her running mate from Pennsylvania. The governor, I mistook last week. I said he was the attorney general. He's since become governor. He's the governor of Pennsylvania. So maybe she would have a little bit of ammunition. And what we have seen is the reality of it is that the people of color in Congress, not all, of course, because there's always like Richie Torres, but the majority of them have seemed to be very disgusted by what's going on with the Palestinians. There's something about, the people of color feeling more like attuned or akin to the Palestinian people or whatnot. So there is a possibility that Kamala kind of falls in that camp. Of course, she could fall into the Richie Torres camp, but there's something to think about there. So it's possible that she might say, this is intolerable. I don't want to see this. This is bad. We've got to solve this. We've got to get a two-state solution. Maybe, it's a gamble. It's a wild gamble at this point with all of them. Kennedy, he's all of the photo ops with that terrible sex rabbi. The optics of that is just awful when you look at the main candidates. So Kennedy, though, did have a podcast. And on that podcast back in March, he did have a Palestinian and an Israeli sit side by side and discuss it out. And so Kennedy might be willing to actually have those types of conversations. So I do think, though, from what I'm looking at all three of them, I think all three of them would be better than Joe Biden, only because Joe Biden has, even though he talks the talk of, we don't want you to be doing these offensives into Rafah. We don't want you to drop these dumb bombs on the kids. Even though he says all of that, he's still, he's an old man, and you just can't teach an old dog new tricks, I guess. And he's just been totally and completely pro-Israel his entire career. And it's very difficult, I think, to, he's a career politician, unlike the others. Even though Kamala Harris has been a politician for a long time, she's not old enough to be, she's not in that same camp as like a Joe Biden. So there's maybe some malleability there. I'm curious what you guys think of Kamala Harris and her address. Do you think she would stick to her guns on this, or do you think she's just a puppet? And as I mentioned, she is a Clinton puppet. Okay. The Clintons actually, it is reported, and Bill Clinton was very, very much the reports are that Bill was very privately on the side of Palestinians, and that there's some, the Clintons might be really, really into a two-state solution. And since Kamala is the puppet of the Clintons, I don't know, guys. I want to hear from you. Email me your thoughts on that. Kim@KimIverson.com. Would love to hear from you. Hey guys, this was just a clip of a longer show. Catch the full show by going to KimIversonShow.com. It is free. It airs Monday through Friday, 5 p.m. Pacific, 8 p.m. Eastern. You could go back now and watch this full interview. I highly recommend it. Again, go to KimIversonShow.com. Thank you so much for watching.